a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we are gathering this morning both virtually and in person as one connected church community. My name is Joanne Cantoni and my pronouns are she and her, your worship leader for this morning's service. We, the members of the Northwest Unitarian Universalist congregation, aspire to be a welcoming, diverse, multi-generational, and inclusive congregation. To that end, we endeavor to treat each other with respect, kindness, and patience, foster expression of ideas, beliefs, values, identities, and experiences, lift one another and the congregation as a whole, provide a supportive environment for all sharing hope on this journey, listen and learn together while caring for each other and the planet, build a fair, peaceful, and socially responsible world. May we create a beloved community with a gentle heart and thoughtful ear, and maintain this community with our 8 Unitarian Universalist principles as our guide. We welcome the Reverend Julie Brock, our Minister of Worship this morning. Her primary responsibility will be to provide direction and planning and scheduling for all the Northwest UU worship services, as well as the joint worship services with the First UU Church of Detroit. We also have Alex Meyers, our guest pianist, leading our communal singing this morning. Each month, we contemplate a theme using soul matters. This month, we are considering the concept of generosity. Today's message asks that we explore the question, how the difference between scarcity and abundance depends more on how we view the world than on the actual resources available. If you are a visitor online and would like Northwest to stay in touch with you, please fill out the visitor form appearing in the chat box. If you are with us in person, you can fill out the visitor sign-in form in the atrium. Please greet your neighbors with a wave from wherever you are. Our opening hymn this morning is number 361 in the grade book. You are invited to rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts to the song. Open your hearts to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
We have some announcements this morning that we'd like to share with you. More information about our events and the congregation are posted in the weekly newsletter and on our website, northwestuu.org. 1. Coffee hour. You're invited to join us for coffee, tea, and light refreshments after the service in the multipurpose room. 2. Getting to know UU. This getting to know, it's okay. This that's what it says here. I'm trying to read it. It's we will be we'll be rescheduling it again soon. 3, monthly potluck. Next Sunday, November 12th, after the service, will be a monthly potluck. Please bring a dish to share. 4, service auction 2023, now online. Visit us at the service auction table during coffee hour in the multipurpose room. Remember to register to bid and buy for the 50/50 raffle, for the $1 raffle tickets for prizes valued $100 to $500, for seats at the 25 board items with set prices, and for 120 auction items with a value of $20 to $2,500. The bidding is open until Friday at 9 o'clock online, and then it's closed and you won't be able to bid anymore. So you need to do it before Friday. Also, be sure to register to buy tickets for the live auction if you plan to attend in person. Before we begin the prelude, let us take a deep breath and settle into a time of worship.
We begin our worship services with a land acknowledgement. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we live and work, which was violently stolen through colonialism, genocide, and forced removal of its traditional stewards. These stewards are the Anishinabek, the Council of Three Fires, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as the Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were forcibly removed from their land and separated from their families through kidnapping and enslavement. We pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. We light our chalice today as a symbol of our faith, knowing this morning that many other Unitarian Universalist congregations across the land and around the world are doing the same. We do so with the words from Reverend Suzelle Lynch. The flame we kindle is the chalice of faith. It holds blessings of warmth and light, of life-giving energy. It shines forth a beacon to guide us all home. It lights up our longings to connect and share. It possesses the power to shape the world where equity and compassion reign supreme. May this warmth and light and life-giving energy celebrate the blessings we have claimed and help us extend them in the hands and hearts that offer these blessings to all. Would you join me in singing number 362, Rise Up, O Flame?
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
We will now sing hymn 123. Our purpose as a religious community is to encourage all who gather together to grow more generous in spirit and in action. This is the great end of all of the world's faith traditions. To bring the human being closer to the divine by acts of creation and compassion. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will mutually support this self-supporting congregation and the shared plate recipient. Every other month throughout the year, Northwest shares 50% of the plate collections with the Southfield Emergency Needs Fund. Their goal is to help residents overcome personal hurdles to achieve a satisfying and productive quality of life. Human Services is a division of the Southfield Community Relations. You can do so in a variety of ways that are now visible on your screen. For those in person, we will pass a collection basket for checks and cash. One of our traditions at Northwest is packing Thanksgiving baskets for families in need. You're invited to bring non-perishable items to Northwest on the Sunday before Thanksgiving, November 19th, and set up the store in the multi-purpose room. The list of items to donate can be found in the newsletter. The school-age children and youth are divided into groups and go shopping for a family whose basket, a large storage bin, they are packing. The bins are decorated and delivered to the City of Southfield Human Services Department for distribution to families. We will take a collection this morning and next week. The 100% plate collection will go towards purchasing gift cards for fresh food and other items not included in their baskets. Thank you for participating in this project. Is from Reverend Elizabeth Stevens. A simple change of perspective can revolutionize the way we move through life. Instead of focusing just on what we want, we can choose to focus on what we want to give. In our personal lives, to live in the spirit of abundance means growing our gifts rather than compensating for a lack that we see or that is seen by others. It means building on our strengths rather than trying to eliminate our weaknesses. It means asking ourselves, what do I want to offer, rather than what should I get in return? In our ethical decisions, to live in the spirit of abundance means being responsible for ensuring the rights of others, rather than demanding our own rights first and foremost. It means accepting that most of us occupy a place of privilege in our society and in our world, which is not to say that we haven't been discriminated against. Most of us have. If we live in the spirit of abundance, though, these experiences lead us to be more compassionate and accepting of others, rather than to feelings of anger or hostility. In our community, living in the spirit of abundance works like magic. When each person gives what is in them to give, be it time, money, presence, or some combination of all three, we wind up with more than enough. Growth and expansion happen naturally, organically, as a result of the gifts of time, insight, and care. You are invited to rise in body and spirit and join me in singing hymn 1008 in the turquoise book, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
So I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is that yesterday here at Northwest UU, we got together with the worship teams from both First UU Detroit and Northwest, and we talked about themes and theology. We came up with readings and music, and we have this whole arc of all these ideas for how worship is going to shape over the next 3 months, and we did it together, and it was a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for everybody who participated. But the bad news is that I went home kind of late and I had my head filled and buzzing with all of these different cool ideas, and I couldn't make myself stop rambling in my head long enough to get a coherent sermon. So I had to write one down. So I'm gonna preach from back here today, and I just hope that I wore a colorful enough dress to distract you. All right, one of my political awakenings, my personal political awakenings happened when I started dating someone who was in a completely different wealth bracket than I was. And I don't mean like white collar versus blue collar. I mean like my dad was a truck driver and his dad sold the successful business that he inherited to buy a tropical fruit orchard. Even though it made him lose a lot of money, he kept it because it amused him. That kind of different wealth bracket. So this guy, we'll call him Ken to protect the mostly innocent. He was worldly. He knew everything. He'd been to 6 continents and lived on 3 of them. He read all the right books and the right magazines. He went to all the best schools. I had never lived outside the Midwest, and I had or was pursuing a degree in theater or theology, which meant that my education consisted mostly of sitting in a circle with other people and talking about my feelings. So Ken and I had this sort of agreement. We agreed that throughout the course of our relationship, he would explain the world to me, and I would teach him how to feel things. To fulfill his part of the bargain, every Saturday morning, which was the only morning I didn't have work, class, or church, Ken would take me to this bougie little Berkeley cafe and supply me with sophisticated things to read over pastries and cappuccino. I would ask questions, and he would edify me. There was actually a point in my life where I felt grateful for this. Our experiment, however, fell apart one day when we came to an impasse of perspective. I can't remember which publication I was reading, but I clearly remember the statistic that flipped my worldview and upended my relationship, and it was this. One morning, I was sitting there reading, and in black and white pops up this statistic from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. According to HUD, it would take $20 billion to completely eradicate homelessness in the United States. Like all of it. Also about that time, Bill Gates, who was the wealthiest person on the planet back then, had just attained a grand sum of money of $60 billion. And back then, having that much money seemed rude. So Bill Gates did this really newsworthy thing with it. He gave half of it away. Well, mostly to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but still, half his money, half his worldly wealth. And people were talking about this. They thought it was a shockingly generous thing to do. But at that moment, all I could think was, wait, Bill Gates can give away half of his money, cure homelessness, and still have more money than he or his family could possibly spend for generations. Those 2 news stories, that statistic and those news stories, side by side, I was confounded. So I asked Ken, why does this guy get to decide if homelessness exists or not? Why does one person have that power? I mean, I guess he was generous with his money, but wouldn't the truly generous thing to do would be to use your power to set up a system where ending homelessness didn't rely on generosity? Ken explained slowly so that I could understand. There are so many issues to tackle: homelessness, food insecurity, healthcare. Bill Gates wanted to cure malaria in Africa, not homelessness in the US. It was his money. He could use it as he wished. And since he couldn't solve all the problems, he got to choose which ones to tackle. Okay, it makes sense, but it got me thinking, maybe Bill Gates can't provide enough for everyone. But collectively, do we have enough? Are there enough resources on the planet to sustain life currently? This is what I found. We know we can cure homelessness with $20 billion. I also found that the world grows 1.5 times the total needed amount of food to feed the global population annually, and an astounding amount of that food goes to waste. Hunger isn't a matter of need, it's a matter of logistics. And healthcare? Healthcare. The US spends 2 to 4 times per person the amount of money on healthcare that any other developed country does, and fewer people have access to that healthcare than in any of those countries. How about this one? If you took the total reported income of the US, not stocks, options, and bonuses, just the salary reported of everyone in 2022 and added it all together, and then divided it by every person, not every person of working age, every single person in this country, each individual would get about $79,000 a year. That's more money than I make. A family of 3 like mine would get $217,000 a year if everything were distributed equally. Half that amount of money would be life-changing. And look, I know the arguments against doing something like that, and I'm not arguing for it. What I am saying is if a society has enough for each person to live in that kind of abundance and deprives so many of basic human dignities, that society is broken. And that's what I told Ken. No, he did not clap. He reacted a little differently. He actually said, "Darlin'," which is how he spoke to me when he was getting ready to explain something. "Darlin', you just don't understand economics." Well, I thought, that's certainly true. So I listened. Economics, Ken said, is the study of how to distribute finite resources in the face of infinite want. I'm not kidding. He always sort of sounded like he was quoting Forbes. In other words, he continued, it is the discipline of trying to solve the problem of scarcity. Scarcity? This took me aback. What, scarcity? Hadn't I just done the research to show that there is enough to go around for the basics? "Darlin'," he said, "scarcity in economic terms doesn't mean there isn't enough. It means resources aren't limitless. It means they could, in theory, run out." Wait a minute, I responded. So economics spends all of its time trying to solve some future imagined possible scarcity while failing to distribute the current abundant resources in a manner that serves basic human needs. There were 3 lasting effects to this conversation. I no longer felt grateful for Ken explaining things to me. I never became an economist. And I forever had a fascination with the myths people tell themselves around resources, scarcity, and abundance. Over the year, this fascination has led me to believe that there are 3 fields of study that dive deeply into the effects and meanings of scarcity and abundance. I wouldn't have considered economics one of them with their pseudo-future scarcity, but in 2012, 3 behavioral economists published a paper called Some Effects of Having Too Little. Have you heard of this? It was a big, splashy paper. The paper was a report of a study they did in which they asked people, regardless of income, to play a game in which they made decisions about resource allocation. Some people, they were called the rich in the game, were given distinct advantages when it came to how many resources they got. And the other group, they called the poor, were not quite given enough to succeed. Astoundingly, as people played the game, no matter what income bracket they came from, no matter how they dealt with their resources in their real lives, those in the rich category made good decisions with their resources, even when times were tight. And those who were constantly poor, that didn't believe that there was going to be a time that they had enough, those people exhibited decisions that exacerbated the problem of poverty. The research theorized this was due to the mental, and I'll add, emotional load that comes to living in scarcity. The study showed that people who didn't have the resources they need fixated on getting those resources at the expense of everything else. They would borrow money, no matter what the payback amount, to get food right now. Other studies of the type asked people to fast for limited amounts of time under medical supervision and tested their state of mind during the fasting. This group was then, they weren't told how long they were going to fast for, though. This group was then observed doing normal things, one of which was watching a comedy movie. They were able to enjoy the movie themselves, and they did laugh, except if there was ever food on the screen. Not a single one of them laughed at any of the jokes. The authors of the study put forth a hypothesis. They were so preoccupied with the food on the screen, they couldn't think about anything else. Their actual mental function was diminished when they were fixated on what they needed to survive. So this is the hypothesis they came up with. Poor people weren't poor because they made bad decisions with their money. Rather, not having enough money led people to make bad decisions. So science once again has shown us something we already know, that being poor is stressful and takes a toll on people. So scarcity, actual scarcity, is bad for human beings, whether you live in scarcity or not, because even if you have enough, no one wants to live next to desperate people making bad decisions. But we as humans, we've done this funny thing. We've moralized poverty. We've allowed ourselves to believe that poverty is the fault of the poor. It's really convenient for us. If we do this, then there's nothing for us to do about poverty. Except that brings us to the next field of study, which addresses scarcity and abundance: psychology. Economics and psychology talk about scarcity in different ways. Economics talks about actual resources available, while psychology talks about how we think about those resources. The first time I can find scarcity and abundance being used and framed in a psychological argument is in Stephen Covey's 1989 landmark bestseller, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In the book, Covey argues that highly effective people are generous ones. They have what he calls an abundance mindset, one that believes that everything goes better when we all have enough. And so they're willing not only to share resources, but ideas and credit and prestige. People with an abundance mindset are great coworkers, friends, and partners because they're optimistic, collaborative, and generous. People with a scarcity mindset, on the other hand, are competitive, suspicious, and defensive. They think that there is not enough to go around, regardless of what the actual resources are, and they're worried they won't get their share of the pie. Folks with scarcity mindset have, as their top priority, not relationships with others or activities of enjoyment, but attaining wealth or status. But here's the thing. Just like we can't moralize behavior that comes from actual scarcity, I don't think we can moralize behavior that comes from scarcity mindset, because psychologists tell us that most people that develop scarcity mindset they have some trauma or affliction in their lives. A few years ago, my husband Joel and I, we welcomed an asylum seeker into our home. She moved in, and when she did, we started going through certain resources at an astounding rate. I couldn't believe how we were going through toilet paper. I couldn't believe how much tomatoes and bananas were disappearing. And I was suddenly losing all kinds of things like nail clippers and socks. One day, I started to smell a sort of sickly, sweet, rotten smell coming from her room. And I saw flies coming from there. And I asked her what was going on. She felt silent. She fell silent, she felt ashamed, but she let me into her room where I saw a closet full of toilet paper and a whole bunch of nail clippers and socks and tomatoes and bananas that had begun to rot. We gave her money every week to buy whatever she wanted. She had a bus pass, she had autonomy and resources, but even though she physically had the means to amend scarcity, she had just spent the better part of a few years living in starvation or a detention center where she had no autonomy or possessions of her own. Just like all the people who were fasting couldn't focus on anything other than food, her mind was focused on the resources, regardless of whether it made sense or not. She had this fear in her. Today, psychologists warn us that scarcity mindset has implications on people's mental health, the ability to build and maintain relationships, and as an article in the actual Forbes said, scarcity mindset might make you rich, but it will also make you miserable. It's difficult to fight that mindset, though, because we've structured a society that is transactional and individualistic, where we measure success not on what we build or who we love, but what we own and what we control. If we were being logical about our resources, we would see that for every homeless person, it costs us $35,000 a year to have services for that person. And yet, if we just built them housing, it would cost less than half that to the taxpayer. But we aren't logical. We're emotional. We're emotional because those who are actually hoarding the resources have invested a lot of time and effort into perpetuating the myth that we live in a just society and people get what they deserve. And worse, we have finite resources. So if we live with an abundance mindset, it's possible that at some future time, scarcity will come for you. Don't be generous. Case in point, Bill Gates now has a net worth of $110 billion, almost double what he had when he felt the need, some pressure to give away his money. And what he spends his time doing now is picking fights with Elizabeth Warren over a proposed wealth tax. So what do we do? What do we do when we've invested so heavily in the myths of scarcity and personal responsibility? Well, maybe you can't fight fire with fire, but I think you can fight myth with myth. And that brings me to the third field of study that deals with scarcity and abundance: theology. Almost every religion tries to act as a balm in times of need. And so every religion has a parable about scarcity being multiplied in the hands of God. The message: if you put your trust in God and believe in abundance, it will surely come your way. Now, this message has been twisted in some truly disgusting and exploitative ways, again, by those with the power wanting to hoard more stuff. But I think if you put it in terms of UU values, it really works. God, for me, is the thing that connects us. It could be a figure or a force, but it is, at the very least, an interdependent web. The ultimate lives in our connections to one another. Theology from across religions is never so consistent as when it tells us that we need to build beloved community in order to build the world we dream about. We have to trust that our resources, our time, our talent, and our treasure are going to be in better hands when we trust it to that which is larger than ourselves. And if we do that, not only will we be living out our values, but we will find more meaning and purpose and connection in our own lives. All this plays out in real life. Y'all, I can't imagine that billionaires are actually happy. First of all, they seem to have a weird addiction to acquisition, and they spend all their time focused on that. And second, someone who has that much power, how could they have authentic relationships? Wouldn't they always be wondering what someone wants from them, or if people could be truly honest with them for fear of losing the resources that being in proximity gets them? Ken couldn't conceive of a world where we just gave people what they needed because he was so steeped in the theology and the mythology of the Wall Street Journal. But I prefer the story of the loaves and the fishes. I believe the miracle of that day wasn't just Jesus did a magic trick. I believe the miracle was that people gathered to hear this man speak about the beauty of community and how the world is a better place if we are kind and generous with our neighbors. And while doing so, people started to get hungry. And some people had journeyed far to see him and were running out of food, and some people brought a lot of food, more than they needed, just in case. I believe the miracle of that day was that Jesus convinced that group of people that it was more valuable to feed one another than to have some people starve and have others possess a pile of stale bread and rotten fish. And when we put it like that, it seems obvious. But y'all, Jesus had to preach to those people for a day and a half to get them to do it. I know this sermon is going on long, but I don't have a day and a half. I have 20 minutes, and I have to believe that I'm not quite the preacher that Jesus was. So, I need your help. I need you all to be the stewards of our stories and our theology and our values. And that means making this a place where we are generous with our gifts, our talents, our ideas, our voices, our labor, and if we have it, our money. Not only will it build this community up, it will build a better world, and it will make us happier, more productive people. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.
Please repeat after me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of hope. The warmth of community. The warmth of community. Or the fire of commitment. Or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Wait, before we do that, we were supposed to sing another song. The sermon went kind of long. Do we want to sing the song, or do we want to go to coffee hour?
It's abundance, let's sing.
It's abundance, let's sing. Okay. I was supposed to announce it, Joanne. I'm sorry, I got kind of carried away.
Okay.
Will you please rise in body and or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 6?
I must answer yes to life, though with pain I make my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my pain and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
We can extinguish the flame. And I'll leave you with these words. I was gonna say some other words, but I'm feeling this thing I want to tell you. Ken was getting a PhD at the time, and when I promised myself I would never, ever date another person who was getting a PhD, so of course I met Joel in his first year of his PhD program. And when he was doing his dissertation, he came home one day and told me about this incredible human being that he had interviewed. He'd said he'd spent his entire life fighting for resources for people across community lines, that resources shouldn't stop at 8 Mile. And he was all glowing about this human being. And do you know what his name was? What? No, it wasn't Ken. Joel, what was his name? And then oh, okay, say it louder, honey. John Amberger. It matters what we do. John he faced a lot of difficulty in his life for standing up for his values, but what he did continues to inspire people today to build a more just and beautiful world. And I feel honored to be here with him today in this sanctuary and with all of you. We already have the values and resources and insight and voices amongst us. May we spread them widely and generously through the world. Go in peace, return in love. Blessed be and amen.